As we begin with the portion, today I will begin with the chapter Electoral Politics. Before I do any explanation, please have a look at the video that follows.
The world's biggest democratic election.
Marathon election.
A mammoth undertaking.
The world's biggest exercise in democracy.
In India, voters picked its central government for the next 5 years. Election needs to come to them. Polling stations need to be set up wherever people live. And in one of the largest and most populous countries in the world, that isn't an easy task. India has to reach voters in coastal cities in the south, in the rural regions of the west, and jungles to the east, and everywhere in between.
And what's more, they want every Indian citizen to be within 2 kilometers of a voting station.
That's only about 25 city blocks, no matter where you are in the country.
It's an incredibly ambitious goal, and yet somehow they're able to do it.
This is the biggest election in the world, and I wanted to know, how does it work? India has 2.3 million voting machines for its 900 million voters. So getting these machines close to every voter is a big logistical undertaking. That's why India doesn't have a single election day. Instead, it's closer to an election month with multiple phases that last weeks. This process takes more than 11 million election officials and security forces who move from polling station to polling station to polling station, from densely populated cities to the rural areas where the majority of Indians live. On election day, voters line up, cast their vote, and get their fingers inked to prevent double voting. This is where the process ends for the voters. But for the election officials, this is just the beginning. Driving a boat out to a remote island is just one of many ways that officials reach every voter. India's vast and diverse terrain requires transportation methods of all kinds. Like in the jungles of this northern state, where elephants transport voting machines to reach a remote town, or in the Himalayas, where officials hike for hours to bring EVMs for election day. Helicopters, trains, they even use camels. But what makes India's elections so impressive isn't just how they reach everyone in such a big country. That's just half the battle. It's also the ways they try to include voters of all backgrounds into the process, a challenge that has been a part of India's elections since the very beginning. India has 22 official languages and hundreds of dialects. And when India became an independent nation, less than a quarter of the population could read and write. The newly formed Election Commission of India created a range of symbols to correspond to each political party, like an elephant, a lotus, a hand, or even an alarm clock. So that from the beginning, all people, regardless of literacy level and language, could vote with confidence. Elections are only getting bigger and more complicated. India has one of the fastest growing populations in the world, and in 2020, young people will make up more than a third of the country.
I voted for the first time since turning 18, and this is my indelible ink mark.
Done with our voting.
So happy that I did my voting for the first time.
This is the biggest election in the world. It takes millions of officials fanning out across a massive country to help hundreds of millions vote. Every part of this, the symbols, the elephants, the boats, the machines, shows how hard it is to make sure that everyone in a country this large can participate. And all without going more than 2 kilometers.
Now that you have watched the video, it's time to discuss some of the main points. Well, in this video you have seen that we have an elaborate system of elections in India. We have the EVM machines that are used. You have seen how the officers are sent to different places in the country, with what difficulty they move. You have also seen how people go to vote in spite of all the difficulties. So election is a big thing in India, And everybody, since independence, it is said that people are voting, though they are illiterate. Now, my point is, why do we need these elections? Because it is so time consuming, so elaborate, so much involved. And on the other hand, we say that the corrupt people are coming to power. Isn't it? We often hear we have all corrupt leaders. So, my question to you is, please think, and next time we will discuss, why do we need elections? Thank you, boys. Hello, everyone. Today, we are here to discuss why do we need to have elections? Imagine the rule of people without elections. In that case, everyone will have to sit together and decide. Is that possible? No, it's not possible. So let's think of a place where people are selected on the basis of their age, knowledge, and experience. Again, how do we decide who is more experienced and knowledgeable? How do we decide if they are ruling as per the wishes of the people? Or for how long do they remain in office? Very difficult. Hence, we require a mechanism. The mechanism that allows people to choose their representatives at regular intervals is referred to as elections. In this case, voters choose who will make the laws. They can choose who will form the government. They choose the party whose policies will guide the government. Now we will see what makes an election democratic.
Everyone has an equal right to vote. Secondly, different parties and candidates contest freely in the election, and the voters have a right to choose their representative from the different contestants. Thirdly, the right to choose a representative is available at regular intervals. Therefore, elections are held at regular intervals of few years. Another characteristic about a democratic election is that the preferred contestant is elected. And finally, it's important that the elections are carried out in a free and fair manner. That is, every person has a right to choose his or her representative on his or her own will. How healthy is this competition? Well, let's analyze some of the advantages and disadvantages of an election as a form of political competition. Let's first focus on the disadvantages. The greatest impact of a political competition is the sense of disunity that arises among different political groups across different localities. People begin pointing fingers at each other for the simplest of issues and aim at winning the election by hook or by crook. These unhealthy practices deter the system to plan for long-term growth of the state or nation. Another major disadvantage of political competition is that good and deserving people hesitate to participate in this unhealthy competition, and as a result, the people lose out on an able representative. However, a healthy political competition can also drive the nation towards growth and prosperity. Let's see how. Now, we all accept the fact that the politicians of today may have a sense of duty to serve the people they are representing. However, they also have an aspiration to grow their own political careers. Many of these politicians may not even have an understanding of the real issues of the people or how they could solve them. So what's the way out? Well, one way is that we can consider educating them about their roles and responsibilities. Another more practical approach to the situation could be to define an appraisal and award system for politicians based on their performance in their political careers, where people appraise their political representatives. This is what is called electoral competition. In an electoral competition, politicians who keep the people happy earn an incentive in the form of a higher chance of being voted for in the next elections, while politicians who fail to satisfy the people they are representing have lower chances of winning the next elections. Therefore, we can see that just the selfish desire of growing one's political career can be a good motivator for politicians and political parties.
Well, students, thank you very much for listening and looking at this video. Have a nice day. For your homework, see that you read the textbook. The chapter is Electoral Politics. Hello everyone. I hope all of you are in the best of health. In the last subtopic, we have discussed about the need for elections, election competition, and the good points about election. In this part, we are going to discuss about the whole system of election. How often do we have election? And for what posts there are elections in India? Please watch the video carefully that follows to understand the concept.
India, you get to vote twice every 5 years. You can cast one vote in the national election and the other one in your state election. India is divided up into small constituencies, which are areas of roughly the same population. In your constituency, keep in mind that the candidates can either belong to a political party or can stand as an independent. When a political party wins the election, it means that a majority of its candidates got elected. In the state elections, you are voting to create a body called the Legislative Assembly or the Vidhan Sabha. Each state has its own legislative assembly and their main function is to make laws within their own state. This body is made up of elected representatives from each constituency of that state. There are multiple candidates standing from each constituency, and the one with the most votes becomes a member of the Legislative Assembly or an MLA. Each state's Legislative Assembly also elects candidates into the upper house of the Parliament. This is called the Rajya Sabha or the Council of States. Each state has a specific number of seats allotted in the Rajya Sabha, which are in proportion to the state's population. The lower house of the Parliament is elected during the national elections. This is known as the Lok Sabha or the House of the People. Similar to the state election, one representative is elected from each constituency of the nation. Each of these elected candidates are called Members of Parliament or MP. We now have our three governing bodies, the Vidhan Sabha, the Rajya Sabha and the Lok Sabha, where your elected representatives go on to vote for the President of India. The President of India, along with the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, form the Parliament of India. The head of the government is the Prime Minister and is appointed by the President of India. The Prime Minister is usually from the political party that holds a majority of the seats in the Lok Sabha. The person to be appointed as Prime Minister must be a member of either house of the Parliament and also appoints members from the houses into a body called the Cabinet of India. This body of ministers is in charge of specific portfolios such as the Ministry of Agriculture, Textiles, Defence, Finance, Law and Justice, Culture and other such ministries that have a direct effect on your life. You have two.
I hope you have understood today's explanation. In case you have any doubts, you can always ask me during the live session that we're going to have. Thank you, boys, and have a nice day. Hello, everyone. I hope all of you are in the best of health. In today's session, we are going to continue with a system of elections. We are going to highlight points like parliamentary constituencies and reserve constituencies. So please pay attention to the videos that follow.
Elections are held at regular intervals to select representatives of the people. Through elections, people can also reject the representatives who had been chosen in the previous election if they are not satisfied with their performance. When elections are held across a country to elect representatives to the national lawmaking body, that is, the parliament, they are known as general elections. When elections are held to elect representatives to the state lawmaking body, they are known as assembly elections. Sometimes, by-elections are held between
The Lok Sabha or Vidhan Sabha elections are held regularly after 5 years. After 5 years term, all of the elected representatives' term comes to an end. However, sometimes, maybe after 3 years or 4 years, the Lok Sabha or Vidhan Sabha is dissolved because the majority party may no longer have majority. As a result, they have to have mid-term elections. So in between the 5-year term, when you have elections, it is referred to as mid-term elections. Sometimes election is held only for one constituency. Maybe that particular parliamentary constituency, an MP, or for an MLA post. Why? To fill the vacancy caused by the death or resignation of a member. So if a member dies or resigns, then there's a vacancy. That time they have elections only for that particular constituency. That is referred to as by-elections.
43 territorial divisions known as constituencies. People residing in a constituency elect one person from among different candidates who represent them in the Lok Sabha, which is the lower house of the parliament. For assembly elections, the states are further divided into smaller constituencies and a representative is elected from each one of them to the respective state legislative assembly. Some constituencies are reserved for weaker sections of the society who cannot compete with other candidates due to lack of resources such as money, social status, influence, or because of their gender. Weaker sections include scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and women. The makers of the Indian Constitution came up with a system of reserved constituencies for adequate representation of the weaker sections. In reserved constituencies, only candidates belonging to a particular weaker section can participate in and contest the elections. This makes the system of elections more representative and more democratic. Once the demarcation of constituency.
Thank you for paying attention to the videos. And as part of your homework, you have to find out from your parents when was the last by-elections held in Goa. I repeat, when were the last by-elections held in Goa? Thank you, boys, and have a nice day. Hello, students. Today I would like to discuss with you elections, but with reference to Goa. All that I have explained to you in the previous 2 units, lessons, but with reference to Goa. Let's take a closer look at this. we spoke of parliamentary constituencies. We said the whole of India is divided into constituencies for Lok Sabha elections, general elections. What happens in Goa? In Goa, we have two parliamentary constituencies, North Goa and South Goa. And from each constituency, we elect a member of parliament, meaning MP. So MP stands for Member of Parliament. Now in 2019, we had general elections in Goa, and two elected MPs were Shripad Naik from North Goa and Francisco Sardina from South Goa. Francisco Sardina is from Congress party, while Shripad Naik is from BJP and he is also the Ayush Minister of India. Now both of these were elected to the parliament. One house is called the Lok Sabha. There are how many seats? 543 seats. So these two are part of this 543 seats of the Lok Sabha. Now, with reference to constituencies for assembly elections, state elections, for parliament, Goa is divided into two parts. For state elections, assembly elections, Goa is divided into 40 constituencies. Now look at the names of all the constituencies. Can you see? It's not that the whole of Tiswadi is one constituency. No, it's not based on taluka either. How do they divide the constituencies? Based on the population of the whole state. For example, number 9C, Porvorim. Porvorim was, earlier it was not a constituency. Recently, for the previous elections, it has been formed into a constituency. Now another highlighted thing is that Perne, if you see, representative reserved for SC/ST. So Perne is reserved for scheduled caste. Remember we spoke about reservation of seats for scheduled caste? I'm explaining to you again. In India, we had a very predominant caste system which was there for centuries. In the 6th standard portion, you must have seen it. The castes were made only to distribute jobs. But what happened was, gradually over the years, caste system became rigid. And the people who were on top of the hierarchy, like the Brahmins, they preferred to dominate the society and keep the people lower at the lower level. So throughout history, we find that these lower sections of people could not move up because they did not have education. They were always doing what their ancestors did, and that was their fate. So when we keep a seat reserved for them, we say from that particular caste only or from scheduled caste only, we want a representative. So what happens? When one of them comes to the assembly, he will definitely bring their grievances, their problems, their frame of mind, and do development works for their society, which is a must in a democratic society. So we have, in Goa, we have reserved seat which is Perne. So all these 40 constituencies have 40 MLAs, and these MLAs meet at the Goa Legislative Assembly. Now, let's look at this. When you have an election, how do you form the government? The assembly election results of 2017. Now, in 2017, we have Congress and NCP getting 17 seats. They won. BJP got 13 seats, MGP got 3 seats, Goa Forward Party got 3 seats, and Independent were 3. AAP did not get any seats in Goa. Now, according to the rules, the governor had to invite the leader of the largest party to form the government. In this case, it was the Congress. But what unfolded in Goa after the 2017 election was a surprise package. Mr. Manohar Parrikar, late Manohar Parrikar, what he did was he quickly gathered his numbers. You have to have more than half, that is, in an assembly of 40 in Goa, you need to have at least 21. So he added 13 plus 3, 3 and 2 independents, and he made his number 21. Quickly got everybody's signature. If one side has 21, the other side definitely will not have 21. Gave it to the governor, and he became the chief minister of Goa. So Manohar Parrikar very smartly, very cleverly put his figures together and submitted even before the Congress would start thinking who their leader was. So, some say this is wrong, but as long as you prove your majority, some say it is correct. So, any which ways, he was the chief minister of Goa. Now, he was not elected, remember, he was the defense minister that time. So, within 6 months, he got elected in the Panjim seat, and he kept his place in Goa. After his demise, Dr. Pramod Sawant has taken over. Now, another concept is by-elections in Goa. As I told you, by-elections is for a particular constituency when it is vacant because of a death or resignation. See, the first person, Mr. Vishwajit Rane, he was elected in 2017 on the Congress ticket. The minute the BJP formed the government, he was very furious. He resigned from the Congress, and that Valpoi's seat was vacant. And he decided to contest elections. There were by-elections for the seat, and he contested on BJP ticket. And he won the elections. Today he is a minister in the BJP government. So that was one by-election. Second by-election was Mr. Siddharth Kunkolekar. He was the MLA of Panjim according to the 2017 elections mandate. Now, if Manohar Parrikar had to become the MLA, somebody had to resign. So, since Parrikar was always being elected from Panjim, Mr. Kunkolekar stepped down. Parrikar stood for elections, and he won the elections. So, this is an example of by-elections. Later on, we find after the demise of Mr. Parrikar, again there were by-elections. Mr. Kunkolekar stood again, but he did not win. He lost to Mr. Montserrat, who is the present MLA of Panjim. Political parties that function in Goa are national parties and local parties. National parties are parties that work in more than 2 states, like Congress, Aam Aadmi Party, BJP. And NCP also we have, Nationalist Congress Party, the Watch. And the local parties that we have is MG Party and Goa Forward Party. So these are local parties and national parties which are operating in Goa. I hope you have understood what I have explained to you. Thank you very much. Hello everyone. In today's subtopic, we are going to discuss the other aspects of the system of election in India. This would include voters list, nomination of candidates, election campaign, polling and counting of votes. I would like to request all of you to pay attention to the video that follows.
Is done, the electoral roll is prepared. The electoral roll is commonly known as the voters' list. The electoral roll is a list of all the people in each constituency who are registered to vote in the elections. Only those who have their names on the electoral roll are allowed to vote. The electoral roll is revised regularly to add the names of new voters and remove the names of those who do not belong to that constituency anymore. A person who is eligible to vote but does not have his name registered on the electoral roll can apply to the electoral registration officer of his constituency. The officer in response updates the register accordingly. With a list of constituencies and voters in place, the country can go for elections when they are due. The notification for elections is issued by a constitutional authority. This constitutional authority is called the Election Commission of India in our country. The process of nominating candidates in different constituencies begins soon after the notification for elections is released. A person contesting under a political party is nominated by that party. Individual candidates may also contest elections independently without the support of any political party. Anyone who wishes to contest the elections has to fill the nomination form and pay a security deposit. He or she must be at least 25 years of age. All candidates are required to make a legal declaration regarding their assets and liabilities, educational qualification and criminal cases, if any pending against them. This information is put into public domain so that voters can make an informed decision about their representatives. After the nomination of candidates, campaigning for the elections begins. In this phase, the nominated candidates interact with the voters and address gatherings to mobilize support in their favor. Campaigning also gives people a chance to know the candidates better and choose the best representative from among a number of candidates. In a democracy, every candidate is free to conduct their election campaign whichever way they want to. However, on certain occasions it may become necessary to regulate campaigns in order to ensure that the process is fair and equitable. For this, there is a model code of conduct in place. A model code of conduct regulates the actions of the candidates contesting elections and their campaigning activities. Any candidate breaching the code of conduct may be disqualified from the elections and not allowed to contest further. The election day is the day when voters cast their vote. Earlier, ballot papers were used for this purpose. Now they have been replaced by electronic voting machines, EVMs. Once the polling is over, all electronic voting machines are sealed and taken to a secure place. They are opened and the votes secured by each candidate are counted. The candidates getting the maximum number of votes in each constituency are declared winners. In a general election, the counting of votes in all constituencies usually takes place at the same time on the same day. After it becomes clear who the winning candidates are, the political party with the maximum number of winning candidates forms the government.
I hope you have all understood this subtopic. Thank you and have a nice day.
Hello students. I hope all of you have completed your notes that have been sent in the previous unit. Today, in Unit 8, we will discuss about the role of an independent election commission that we have in India. And this independent election commission makes election in India democratic. I would like all of you to pay attention to the video that follows.
During the election process, we often hear reports of unfair practices, such as tampering of the voters' list, misuse of government facilities by the ruling party, exorbitant spending of money on campaigns by rich political parties and threatening voters and rigging on polling day. Although some of these reports are true, in a vast country like India, no political party can win an election through such unfair practices alone. India has a democratic election system. The election system in India is controlled and governed by an independent and very powerful body called the Election Commission or EC. The Election Commission in India is equivalent to the judiciary. The EC is headed by the Chief Election Commissioner, who is assisted by several election commissioners. Under the guidance of the Chief Election Commissioner, the Election Commission of India performs several functions, starting from the announcement of the elections to the final declaration of the result. It drafts and implements the Code of Conduct for elections and takes disciplinary action against parties or candidates violating it. At the time of elections, the Election Commission is authorized to advise the government on decisions affecting the election and also control the transfer of government officials across departments and roles. Indian politics in the last 15 years has seen the Election Commission evolve in its role from a policy maker to an independent and powerful administration system. The Election Commission has the power to order a re-poll in case it finds evidence of unfair practices during polling. Another method to ensure that an election is democratic is to analyze the pattern of public participation. We can measure the people's participation through the voter turnout on the polling day. In India, the lesser privileged groups, such as the poor and the illiterate, turn up for polling in large numbers compared to the rich and the literate. Similarly, voters in rural areas turn out more than those in urban areas. Another study conducted in 2004 reveals that a majority of the people in India think their individual vote matters and can make a difference to the system. Another significant indicator of the free and fair nature of an election is the election result itself. In India, an average of about 50% of the sitting MPs and MLAs lose the election. Again, in most cases, candidates known for their criminal connections or intimidating voters with money have also lost elections. For example, in the assembly elections in Maharashtra in October 2009, several candidates known to have criminal backgrounds, except for a few rare occasions, in most cases, the losing party accepts the election result as the people's choice. This clearly proves that in India, the elections are fairly democratic.
Thank you, students, for listening patiently to this video. For your homework, I would like you to find out the name of the Chief Election Commissioner of India. Thank you and have a nice day. Hello students. In the previous subunit, we have highlighted and looked into the role of the Election Commission of India. In this unit, we will look at some of the challenges that come in the way of having free and fair elections in our country. Just a few points that are very familiar to all of us. Please pay attention to the video that follows.
Fair election has several challenges. All rich and established political parties and candidates enjoy an edge over the smaller parties and independent candidates. Besides, there are instances of candidates with criminal connections winning an election purely by virtue of putting pressure on other candidates to step down. Then, there are influential political families who get tickets allotted to family members only. For example, in the recent polls, leaving the voters with hardly any options to choose from. Such challenges are being faced by many democracies other than India. Therefore, it's important that the citizens of all these democracies collectively contribute towards reforming the existing practices and making the electoral system more effective.
With this, we come to the end of this chapter. Please read the lesson and be ready for a test on this chapter.